Hello everyone, I'm Darren again. Today's question is asking if I would discuss narcissism and addiction. So in this video, I'm going to look at the nature of both addiction and narcissistic personality. I'll look at the crossovers, the differences. I'll also look at whenever it's both. But before I begin, I would like to say that addiction can happen to anyone. In fact, the World Health Organization estimates that around 15% of the global population struggles with some form of addiction. So that's over 1 billion people. And it's not just substances like alcohol or drugs, but behavioural addictions like gaming, pornography, gambling or shopping. They're on the rise as well. And this isn't just because of how our brains are wired for instant gratification. I think it's also about accessibility, because smartphones have made it easy to access addictive apps. And many people who struggle with addiction, they often say that their biggest triggers are things like feeling anxious or feeling stressed. Now these can be triggers, yes, but I believe the biggest triggers are actually accessibility and opportunity. The opportunity to drink, to watch pornography, to gamble, or whatever it is. And if the opportunity isn't there, a full-blown addict will try to create one. For instance, imagine someone struggling with alcoholism. They've got money in their pocket and time on their hands. They might try to create a situation where they get access to alcohol. Also, there is a common misconception that addiction is a choice. Well, to the best of my knowledge, no one ever decides to be an addict just to see what it's going to be like. It tends to be something that creeps up on you, and it is recognized as a chronic disease which can be influenced by genetics, environment, and psychology. I would also like to say that there is a difference between addiction and substance misuse, which tends to be a broad term. When it comes to substance misuse, this could be, for instance, binge drinking at the weekend. But the binging could be a one-off or something that maybe just happens occasionally. But even if it is a pattern, such as every Saturday night, it doesn't necessarily lock someone into the full grip of an addiction. So what is an addiction? Well, in 2020, a study in Nature Review's Neuroscience showed how addiction rewires neural pathways. It hijacks the reward system by flooding the brain with dopamine, and this can make it difficult for someone to break free from it, even if they know the harm it's causing themselves and other people. So the brain's hijacked focus can lead people to prioritize their fix or their dopamine hit over their responsibilities, relationships, their families, or their work. The brain becomes dependent on the very thing that gives it its hit. But addiction is often about escaping pain, seeking pleasure, or trying to fill a void. It's like trying to escape one feeling for another one. For instance, I don't want to feel bored, I want to feel excited. I don't want to feel weak, I want to feel powerful. Or I don't want to feel pain, I just want to feel numb, and so on. So what we often see is a maladaptive coping mechanism for underlying pain, distress, or trauma. Now, in an interview I had with Dr. Darren Haber, he stated that addiction doesn't discriminate. So the truth is, anyone can become addicted regardless of where they're from, their background, or whatever their life looks like. But here's the thing, an addiction can bring out selfish behaviour and constant lying. Someone may even deny that they have a problem. And this can look like narcissism because the addiction can have such a strong grip on someone that it takes precedence over everything and everyone else in their lives. Now, when it comes to narcissism, we're not just talking about someone who could be selfish or arrogant at times. In its extreme form, narcissistic personality disorder is marked by grandiosity, there's a need for admiration, and there is a striking lack of empathy for other people. And narcissists often see themselves as superior to everyone else, they're untouchable, and they are entitled to special treatment. But even though narcissism can be quite complex, it is often rooted in fragile self-esteem. There's a deep need for validation and quite often an inability to connect with others on anything other than a superficial level. In 2018, a study in the journal Personality and Individual Differences found a strong correlation between addictive behaviours and narcissistic vulnerability. In other words, feeling insecure despite outward confidence. Narcissistic people tend to live inauthentically. They deny their true selves. They deny reality. So an addiction might be a way to escape the insecurity underneath their bravado, fill an inner void, or to maintain an illusion of control and superiority. It can also be a way to avoid facing their vulnerabilities, to numb their shame or their anxiety. So, as an example, a narcissistic person has this need to feel in control and to be admired, but in reality, there's a fear of just being ordinary, not being special, or maybe looking weak. So alcohol or drugs might become a crutch, a way for them to feel invincible and to drown out self-doubt. If it's an addiction to sex or pornography, they might get to feel powerful and desirable. Or maybe it's compulsive work, so they're always chasing the next big win to try and prove their worth. But the thing is, the addiction feeds the narcissism, and the narcissism fuels the addiction. It's often a vicious cycle. And an addiction can amplify their narcissistic tendencies, leading to further denial and isolation. Now, where it can be difficult to separate narcissism and addiction can be, firstly, how empathy can erode over time as an addiction takes its grip on someone. Now, that being said, that doesn't mean an addict doesn't feel empathy or they don't feel shame and regret over their addictive behaviours, but they often feel helpless and unable to control themselves. With narcissism, however, the lack of empathy is already there. They also feel entitled to do whatever it is they want. Next, an addiction can lead to a disconnection from others. Now, sometimes the disconnection might already be there as a result of some kind of trauma, but the addiction leads to further disconnections. In fact, one of the things often explored in therapy when it comes to recovery are ways to rebuild connection with other people. Narcissistic people, however, already find it difficult to form meaningful connections with others due to a fear of vulnerability. Next, an addict might exaggerate tales to excuse what they're doing or hide it or maybe even lie to try to get money or resources to feed their addiction. A narcissist, however, might brag about how much alcohol they can consume or how much money they spend because they deserve only the best. Sometimes, though, narcissistic people might play the helpless victim who are unable to help themselves until other external issues in their lives are resolved. For instance, they might say things like, if it wasn't for this, or if it wasn't for that, or I need to get to the root of this before I can quit. And these other issues are generally known as sideshows. They're aimed at taking the focus off their behaviour. Now, when it comes to someone with narcissistic traits, admitting that they need help can be especially difficult. Their ego, their need for control, might make them deny the problem. Now, like all addicts, they might find better ways to hide the addiction, or it may shift to something else. For instance, it might shift from drugs to alcohol or from gambling to compulsive spending. Now, that being said, if a narcissistic person does overcome an addiction to, say, alcohol, well, they can become very self-righteous and hyper-moralistic. They know the cure for addiction because no one struggled as much as they did, and they're an amazing person today. And quite often they may have stopped drinking or gambling or whatever it was, but the underlying problems are still there. So to summarise, it isn't always easy to discern the difference between addiction and narcissism, but studies hint that narcissists are at higher risk for addiction because drugs or alcohol can temporarily soothe the sting of criticism or any failure that they may have had. And when it's a full-blown addiction, narcissistic people might lean on substances or certain behaviours to mask their insecurities or to amplify their sense of superiority. But while narcissists might be more prone to addiction, it's not exclusive to them, and addiction can breed narcissistic-like behaviours. Someone deep in an addiction might lie or exploit others to keep using, and they often look self-absorbed. And where narcissistic people tend to live in denial, they might resist help, seeing it as a weakness. An addict, however, might be so entrenched they can't see a way out. People who just misuse substances might just shrug it off as not that big a deal. But anyone can fall into the trap, especially if they're dealing with trauma, stress, or isolation. So whether someone is narcissistic or not, the root cause can often be the same: a search for something to either numb the pain or boost the ego. But regardless of whether someone is narcissistic or not, while addiction can be universal, so is recovery. Recovery is possible, and many people find help through therapy and various support groups. But it involves people being honest with themselves. Because an addiction can cost you more than you ever thought you'd have to pay, and it never gives back a fraction of what you thought it would. And where there is a dual diagnosis, it can be difficult to separate what can be the addiction from other underlying issues. But as I often say, difficult is not the same as impossible. Recovery means addressing everything, not just the addiction. Viktor Frankl once said that it is meaning that keeps us going. Whenever we lack meaning, we're more likely to turn to addictions to fill the gap. So if you're struggling with an addiction, or if you're involved with someone who has an addiction, I would invite you to consider reaching out for support. Recovery can be a lot easier if you don't have to do it alone. Now, I hope you found this topic to be interesting. If you did, please consider subscribing, and until next time, thanks for watching.